Welcome, test dummies, to the Cardboard Crash Course. I'm Ethan, I'll be your safety instructor today, and it's a very special day because we're going to be talking about the Twilight Imperium 4th edition base game, as well as the Prophecy of Kings expansion alongside of it. As this is a holistic expansion, I'm going to be treating this as one single experience, and if you're going to be looking for any specific parts, go ahead and check out the timestamps in the description. Also, if you're looking for more content on the channel, go ahead and like and subscribe, as I do this stuff all the time. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and check it out. I think the first step to any good tutorial is opening up the box with you. So let's go ahead and do that now. First, we've got the base game box, the one we've had for years. There's a lot of components in each of these. Now, the Prophecy of Kings expansion. Almost the same size as the base game box. First, of course, right away, all of the Learn to Play guides as well as the lore compendiums. This will help you get experience of both the story of the game as well as the components. Next, we have all of the faction sheets, the people you're actually going to be playing as in this game. Along with that, for the players, we'll have the leadership sheets, as well as command sheets. Next, we've got every color imaginable for different pieces, as well as technologies throughout the game. We've got our common supply of different tokens and cards. Plenty of dice for combat. A menagerie of different tiles to put together the game board with. Strategy cards that will be helping our strategies throughout the game. Miscellaneous tokens. And finally, the faction-specific cards and tokens as well. So your box is going to be a little more crazy and unorganized because Fantasy Flight's inserts, but these sort of organizers really help me out, and maybe we'll show how to do that later on. So, with all of the pieces together, there's quite a bit to look through in this game, and plenty more that I didn't pull out of the box. Without further ado, I think that we should go ahead and check these out step by step, starting with the objective of the game. Throughout the war, politics, trade, and exploration in this game, your main objective is really going to be the victory points. Getting 10 or possibly 14 victory points in a longer game is going to be the only way that you complete your victory, and will represent your political power, or possibly your militaristic power over the galaxy. It's all up to you.
Before the game starts, you'll choose from one of the 24 factions. These are peoples across the galaxy that all provide a completely different play experience from each other, and have very unique abilities. I have a playlist in the description explaining each one thoroughly, and it keeps growing. For the purposes of this video, I love the underdogs, so I'm going to go ahead and choose the Empyrean, and we'll take a look at them. The factions have specific command counters and control counters, and along with these, you'll go ahead and choose from one of the 8 color variations available. I chose pink. You also will go ahead and start with a deck of corresponding color technologies, 5 color-specific promissory notes that begin in your hand, and add to these 2 your faction-specific technologies, and the faction-specific promissory note, which in the Empyrean's case are 2 of them. You'll then apply the leadership sheet and the command sheet to either side of your faction sheet. And you'll start with the leaders that are faction-specific with the notches appropriate to the notches that are printed on the leader sheet on the top right corner of the cards, as well as the mech introduced in the expansion. You'll also start with any of the faction's home planets in your play area, readied. Next, through a system of your choice or by random selection, you'll choose the speaker, We essentially do the least experienced player, and this is essentially the first player. That player will place Mecatol Rex in the center of the galaxy. It'll begin this way each game. Then, by the rulebook, you'll divvy out the tiles to each person with blue backs and red backs. And then, ring by ring, you'll be building the board. Starting with the speaker and moving around, you'll build the first ring around Mecatol Rex by placing tiles adjacent to each other. Finishing up the ring, remember that two anomalies, these red cornered tiles, cannot be next to each other, so I'll instead go ahead and put a wormhole here. This fixes it up, and we'll keep doing this until all rings are completed, one by one. This is showing off a 3-player setup. It's 2 full rings around the galaxy and then juts off for the home system placement. Next up is 4 players. The home systems are quite spread apart, but it is a full 3-ring galaxy. 5 players introduces Hyperlanes. This is essentially tiles that show adjacency and split off an entire section, making the map symmetrical. 6 players is the intended way of play. This is 3 full rings around Mecatol Rex, with home systems on the corners. 7 players introduces a 4th ring, but reintroduces the Hyperlanes because of the odd number of players. And 8 players is 4 full rings around Mecatol Rex. This is my personal favorite way of play and looks quite impressive. Next, you'll place the Gamma Wormhole Nexus next to the board. This system is considered part of the board, but is not adjacent to anything quite yet. Next up, you'll gather the common decks and tokens, starting with the 4 exploration decks, the relic deck, action card deck, secret objective deck, the agenda deck, and then the planet deck and the legendary planet abilities. Also, you'll get trade goods and commodities, infantry tokens, fighter tokens, dice, all 10-sided, and the rest of the miscellaneous tokens. You'll need some of these right away. Speaking of which, you'll place the Custodian's token on Mecatol Rex, and then Frontier tokens on each of the tiles that do not contain any planets throughout the entirety of the galaxy. Next up, you'll place your starting home system in the spot dedicated to it. This should be nearest to your play area. Then you'll look at the starting units and place those on your home system. Now keep in mind that structures and ground forces are placed on the planets of your choice, and the ships are all placed in the space area. Then you'll look at the starting technology as well. This is, for us, dark energy tap. So we'll go ahead and search the technology deck for it and place it in our play area, face up and ready to go. Then putting 3 command counters in the tactic pool, 3 command counters in the fleet pool, and 2 command counters in the strategy pool. The fleet are only flipped over in case this gets bumped. Next up, we'll prepare all the objectives for everybody to see. We put a control counter on 0 from each person, indicating that we all start with 0 victory points. You'll then place 5 Stage 1 public objectives and 5 Stage 2 public objectives near the victory point track. Then, reveal the first 2 public objectives to everybody. These will start the game available to be scored. Then each person draws a secret objective. You only get 1 for now, but can have a max of 3.
So, to put it in short, we're going to be going through the phases of the game. Strategy, action, status, and agenda phase. We're going to keep going through that over and over until somebody has enough scored points to win. Now, it's very important that we keep a rigid structure to this and allow each trigger to happen, even if you don't think that everything's going to happen each time. Because people all have to be on the same page when we're playing with such a complex game here.
We'll start with the strategy phase. In this phase, we have one goal: pick a strategy card for the round. Now the strategy cards will initiate both your initiative number as well as your whole strategy for the game round. Each person, starting with the speaker, will go around and choose a specific strategy card that they'd like. In the top right corner, it will show your initiative number. This will be from lowest to highest and will move around the action phase, with one action per person moving up and then looping back around to the lowest. They usually have more powerful ones for higher initiatives. On the remaining strategy cards unchosen, we'll place a trade good on each of them. Whenever they're chosen in future rounds, you'll gain those trade goods. In 3 or 4 player games, instead, you'll get 2 strategy cards chosen in snake order, and then you'll count your initiative as the lowest among those strategy cards, this being 2. When you use a strategy card during the action phase, it'll be flipped, but you'll keep your initiative number. Next up is the action phase. We'll be utilizing the leadership and the command sheets for this. On your command sheet, you have 3 pools. First, the tactic pool. This shows how many tactical actions, the main part of the game, you can complete during the action phase. Next up is the fleet pool. This shows how many non-fighter ships you can have in a system at a time. Finally, the strategy pool. A lot of game effects will ask you to spend strategy tokens, and you'll definitely want to keep a couple in for them. The actions during the action phase can consist of a component action, which is anything with the action header either on your faction sheet, action cards, or other tokens. Action cards, when used, are discarded. Next, the strategic action. This allows you to use the primary ability of your strategy card and then let everybody else use the secondary ability. It is then flipped. Unless you pass, you can still keep doing actions after this. The tactical action is the final one. By doing this, you'll place a tactic token from your pool into a system. This is the active system now. Because of the complex nature of the tactical action, I have a whole section of the video dedicated to that, so wait just a moment here. Let's move on to the status phase first. The status phase is going to consist of a bunch of small steps, all completed in a specific order. First, we'll score objectives in initiative order. This is important because some people can win the game before others if they pick lower initiative. You'll do this by placing a controlled counter on up to 1 public and up to 1 secret objective, scoring those. You cannot rescore objectives. You'll then move your initiative count up that many victory points. Next, the speaker will reveal the next public objective, making it available in later rounds. You'll go through all of the Stage 1 and then Stage 2 public objectives. If at any time you would go to reveal a public objective and you cannot reveal one, you instead end the game, scoring with the top person winning immediately. Next up, each person will draw 1 action card. This does not seem like a lot, but they are definitely tide-changing effects, either component actions, triggered abilities, or otherwise. You can have up to 7 of them, and they're discarded after use. If all of the action cards are discarded, you shuffle up the discard pile to create a new action card deck. Next up, we'll remove all of our command counters from the game board. After activating a bunch of systems, we definitely want to remove these in order to reactivate them. We'll place them in our reinforcements. Then, each person will gain 2 command counters from the reinforcements, put them anywhere they'd like, including the fleet pool, and then redistribute any command counters they'd like for the next upcoming round. Keep in mind that if you ever change your fleet pool size, it'll update, and the amount of non-fighter ships must be destroyed down to that number. Next up, we'll go ahead and ready all of our cards. This includes strategy cards, planet cards, any technologies that require exhaustion, and the agent, one of our leaders that very frequently exhausts itself. Next, we'll repair all of our damaged units. This is anything that used its sustained damage ability during the combat of the previous round. We'll want these up to be able to participate again. Finally, we'll return our strategy cards to the common play area, to be chosen next round. These are all ready and unexhausted.
Now, next up after the status phase would be the agenda phase, but I'm going to go ahead and push that a little bit to later because I think it's important to explain some of the things I skipped over just a moment ago, starting with the very complex item known as the tactical action.
When a command counter from the tactic pool is placed in a system as an action, this is called activating the system. The system will remain the active system for the rest of this tactical action. Keep in mind that you can't activate a system that already has a token of yours, but you can activate a system if it has another player's token. You also cannot activate a system if you can't take one out of your tactic pool. Next is the movement step. Ships may move into the active system from one or more multiple other systems. They must end in the active system. Ships can move up to their movement value and can transport ground forces and fighters equal to or less than their capacity value, which then remain in the space area until the invasion step. Ships cannot pass through systems with other players' ships, and you cannot move out of systems that contain your command tokens. Next up, the defending player may perform Space Cannon offense, using any units with Space Cannon in the active system. The Space Cannon value shows the number you need to hit on rolling a 10-sided die to produce a hit against the attacking ships. So this shows a Space Cannon of 6. So we're going to go ahead and roll one die. Getting a 10, we produce a hit against the enemy ships. Now, in any situation in which you produce hits, the defending player is going to apply those hits to one of their ships. Now, in this scenario, the player is going to cancel one of those hits instead, using an ability from their ship called Sustained Damage. This allows a ship to pretty much have 2 hit points instead of 1. The Sustained Damage ability is shown on this unit called a Dreadnought. If they instead didn't use Sustained Damage and just took the hit, this is what it would be shown like. The attacking player would produce the hit, and then the defending player would apply it to their Dreadnought and simply remove it from the game board instead. Anytime you would roll dice, it's done like this, including in space combat, which we'll go ahead and start off with Anti-Fighter Barrage. This is another unit ability that is on some units, namely destroyers. When you roll for Anti-Fighter Barrage, you'll roll with the number in parentheses being the amount of dice, and the number outside the parentheses being the number you have to hit with those dice to produce a hit. Just like before, the defending player will go ahead and apply those hits, but anti-fighter barrage attacks must be destroying fighters. All anti-fighter barrage abilities are done simultaneously on both sides. Next up, we'll be able to announce our retreats. Either player may announce their retreat now, and they have to announce their retreat into a system that contains one of their units or their planets they control. They cannot retreat yet, however. A whole combat round has to occur still. Any ground forces that are retreating with ships this turn must enter the space area now from the planets. Finally, the first half of the battle, making the combat rolls. Each unit will make a combat roll, rolling at least one die, unless it is shown to have multiple markers next to the combat value on their sheet, as does the War Sun here with 3. You'll roll all of the dice simultaneously and track each of the unit's hits separately on both sides. Hits produced are kept until the next step and are going to be assigned. Assigning the hits happens immediately afterwards. Each person assigns their hits to their own ships as always, destroying them unless they use sustained damage, and moving them to the reinforcements. Hits are assigned to any ship, so cheaper ones are good to blow up right away and keep your bigger ones for later. If the capacity value decreases below the number of ground forces or fighters in the space area, you must destroy down to reach that number. Keep in mind at this time any unit abilities that happen during combat will go off. These can greatly turn the tide, even destroying an entire enemy fleet. Both players will destroy their ships simultaneously, as combat is very difficult to predict. Any players must retreat now to the system that they chose earlier, if they announced a retreat. The retreated to system must contain your units or planets controlled by you. If not, you cannot retreat there. When you move people there, you must then place a command counter from your reinforcements if one is not already there, locking you out from being able to do it again. Finally, we have the end of combat. If both of the players still have ships left over there, combat is repeated again, beginning at the announce retreat step. A winner is determined by being alone in the active system, whether the person retreated away or you completely annihilated them. Next up, we have invasion. You may choose now which planets in the active system are going to be invaded, and bombard those planets. The active player may use their bombardment ability of all of their ships simultaneously if planets contain enemy units there. The bombardment ability, like before, is in the parentheses, the amount of die, and the number you need to hit. You roll these dice, and the defending player assigns them to any of their ground forces on the planet. Like in this example, they'll remove the last one. You'll then commit any ground forces to any of the planets you would like to land on. In this example, the pink player is going to place his ground force on the planet to head down to the surface. At this moment, the defending player may use his space cannon ability again during space cannon defense. They'll roll the same die as before, and the offending player has to assign his hits to any of the ground forces coming down to the planet. Finally, ground combat. Both players make their combat rolls simultaneously from their infantry and mechs on the planets. The mechs have sustained damage, so they may be used now, but keep in mind there is no retreating in this step. It's total annihilation. Next up, you'll establish control on the planet. The active player gains control of all of the planets exhausted that still contain their units. All of the structures belonging to the defending player are then destroyed on that planet. If a planet was instead taken for the first time instead of taken from another player, it is explored. To explore a planet, you'll look at what color the planet trait is and pull an exploration card that matches that planet trait. Resolve it and discard it unless it is a relic fragment or attaches itself to the planet. In this case, we got a card that we would immediately resolve. But if we got a relic fragment, we would instead take it from the deck, show it to every person, and then place it in our hand to be traded away or used later. If we got something that attaches to the planet, we would instead take that card and place it underneath the planet that we explored, improving its influence and resources values in this case. And then we would take the token that corresponds to that attachment and place it on the planet, indicating the change in values to every player. So what are these values and symbols on the planet? Well, the resource and influence values are usually the most important. The resource value is the one in yellow. It allows you to research tech and build units. The influence value is blue and used to gain command counters and vote later on when we unlock the agenda phase. The planet traits, being industrial, cultural, and hazardous, show which exploration deck you'll use and also count towards objectives. And finally, planets may have technology specialties, which will help us research tech later on. Keep in mind that Mecatol Rex and all of the home systems do not have planet traits, so they cannot be explored. Also, some planets are legendary, as marked with this icon. Legendary planets are powerful seats of interest across the galaxy, and come with their own legendary planet ability card, as well as the planet card. This can be used at the end of your turn for an interesting effect, but if you gain a planet, the ability card also comes exhausted. Finally is production. The active player may produce using units with the production keyword in the active system, mostly space docks. You may produce units up to the production value of all combined units in the system. When units are produced, resources must be spent as one lump sum equaling the combined cost value of all units produced. While producing, units with multiple icons next to their cost value like this infantry can produce multiple for just the cost of one. When planets are used for resources, they may not also be used for influence. You exhaust them to use those resources, and any excess resources from the planet spent is lost. When you produce ships, they are placed in the space area, but ground forces are placed on the planet with the space dock that produced them. Some space docks are blockaded, which means they reside on a planet where enemy ships are in the space area of. Though they still can produce ground forces, they cannot produce ships. Also keep in mind that you may activate systems even if you do not expect each step to occur. Many people will end up activating their system just to produce with their space docks. Now, though I won't be going over every single component in the box, I do think it's important to check out each of the strategy cards here, as they introduce new mechanics and are integral to your strategy throughout the game, and even have specific things that you can't find anywhere else. So, the primary and secondary of these cards are interesting. When you have one of these cards, not only do you have its initiative number, but you have the ability to perform a strategic action at any time. This is using the primary of this card, and then immediately allowing everybody else simultaneously to use the secondary of the card. You use the primary first, and then the secondary, but you cannot yourself use the secondary. Only the other people may. It's usually a slightly worse version of the primary of the card. You can pass during this phase if you've at least used this primary ability. This allows each person to be able to use the secondary and get a little bit of help off of each of the strategy cards. But once you pass, you may not perform any other actions during the action phase. The only thing you can do is perform secondaries of other strategy cards. So let's go ahead and start with leadership. This is initiative 1. The primary player immediately gains 3 command tokens, then is offered the choice to spend any amount of influence to receive 1 command token for each 3 influence spent. Tokens are placed on your sheet in any 3 pools, but existing ones are not redistributed. The secondary players then are allowed to do the 1 command token for each 3 influence spent, but don't get the 3 for free. Keep in mind that these command tokens are how you're going to be able to play the game using these tactical actions, and they're very integral. Now, this card is really most important for its single initiative, as going first is really powerful. Next up is number 2, Diplomacy. Its primary ability allows you to choose a single system other than Mecatol Rex that contains a planet you control. Each other player places a command token from the reinforcements in that system, then ready up to 2 exhausted planets you control anywhere over the board. The secondary then allows anybody to spend 1 token from their strategy pool to ready up to 2 exhausted planets you control. Keep in mind that they cannot move units out of places that have their command tokens, so taking 1 from their reinforcements and putting 1 in completely locks you out. Moving on to number 3, Politics. The primary ability allows you to choose a player other than the speaker to gain the speaker token. This can be yourself, remember. Then you draw 2 action cards and look at the top 2 cards of the agenda deck, which are the laws. You place them on the top or bottom in any order. The secondary allows you to spend 1 strategy token to draw 2 action cards. Keep in mind that the action cards are powerful component abilities or passive abilities, and really put you ahead in the game, and you can only have up to 7, however. Also keep in mind that the speaker picks your strategy cards first the next time around, so that's really what people are going for with this. Number 4 is Construction. Its primary ability allows you to place 1 PDS or 1 space dock in any planet you control, then place 1 PDS on a planet you control. Keep in mind that you can only have up to 2 PDS and 1 space dock on each planet. The secondary allows you to spend 1 token from your strategy pool and place it in any system. You may place 1 PDS or 1 space dock on a planet you control in that system. The secondary players have to wait to be able to produce because they cannot activate a system that has a token in there, but the primary player gets to use their space dock right away. Number 5 is Trade. The primary ability allows you to gain 3 trade goods, and then replenish your commodities, and then choose any number of other players to replenish their commodities for free. The secondary allows you to spend 1 strategy token from your strategy pool to replenish your commodities. So the trade goods are pretty much a god currency. At any point that you would spend either resources or influence, you can instead spend trade goods. You can also trade these to other people. The commodities don't allow you any direct power, but if traded to another person, they become trade goods. You may have any number of trade goods, and they're stored on your command sheet. Commodities are replenished up to your commodity value as printed on your faction sheet. Number 6 is Warfare. The primary ability allows you to remove one of your tokens from the game board, then gain one command token. Then redistribute any number of command tokens on your command sheet. The secondary allows you to spend one token from your strategy pool to use the production ability of one of your space stocks in your home system. Taking one of these tokens out allows you to put another one in, reactivating a system you've already done, or moving ships out of a system that's been activated prior. Next up is number 7, Technology. The primary ability allows you to research one technology. Then you may spend 6 resources to research one more technology. The secondary ability allows you to spend 1 token from your strategy pool and 4 resources to research one technology. Now, we'll explain technology later, as that's a bit of a deep dive, but this is the only place you're pretty much going to be able to research things outside of a couple random action cards. Finally, number 8, Imperial. The primary ability allows you to score 1 public objective if you fulfill its requirements, then gain 1 victory point if you control Mecatol Rex. Otherwise, you draw 1 secret objective. Now you can have up to 3 scored or unscored secret objectives, and this ability allows you to score public objectives outside of the normal status phase, so you can do both. The secondary ability allows other people to spend 1 token from your strategy pool to draw 1 secret objective. Not quite as powerful, but this definitely will give you more options throughout the game. So, let's go ahead and move on. In order to unlock the agenda phase, somebody will have to remove the Custodian's token. In order to do that, you must spend 6 influence as you invade Mecatol Rex. The person who does this gains the Custodian's token face up near their play area. This gains them 1 permanent victory point that cannot be taken away. When the agenda phase is unlocked, we'll go through the steps, starting with the speaker revealing the first agenda. He'll announce the name, type of agenda, outcomes, and all of the text to every player. Then each player, starting with the left of the speaker, with the speaker going last, can vote on the agenda. They'll do this by exhausting their planets, applying their influence value for the amount of votes they'd like. Then, once everybody's voted on whichever outcome they'd like the most, the speaker will go ahead and resolve the first agenda. This will immediately apply to all players around the table. Then, after this is done, the speaker will reveal the next agenda, doing this all over again. After reading it completely to each player and making sure everyone understands, everybody will vote on the second agenda. They'll use any unspent ones they'd like, applying the same way the influence value for any amount of votes they'd like for each outcome. Then, you'll resolve the second agenda. There are 2 types of agendas that you can vote on. First are directives. This is an immediate effect that takes place the moment the agenda is resolved, and affects the state of the game, then is discarded. The other one is a law. If the outcome was voted for, it is now a permanent new rule to the game and can really change things up. If it's against, like a directive, its effect is applied, then it is discarded. The types of outcomes consist of a for or against, where players have 2 choices, an elect player, where people have choices equal to the number of players in the game, and an elect planet, where everybody has choices equal to the number of planets on the game board. You may only choose 1 outcome, or completely abstain from the vote. You must say the vote aloud and spend the influence at the time of voting. If there is ever a tie in the outcome of an agenda, the speaker decides the outcome. Transactions during this phase may consist of up to 1 transaction per player pair during each vote. Any players may trade, regardless if they are neighbors during this phase only. Keep in mind that bribery is definitely allowed and encouraged. Economy and bribery are huge parts of the politics of this game. Now, after agendas are completely resolved, all planets are readied, and the game continues back at the strategy phase. You do not ready any other cards though, just the planets.
Phew. Alright. Holy cow. That's a lot to go through. Getting to the end of my script here, so I think it's important, lastly, to go over a few housekeeping items. Just small bits here and there that's really nice to keep in mind, especially ones that were introduced in the expansion for all of you returning players.
The active player, during the action phase, may negotiate with each neighbor, meaning having either controlled units or planets in adjacent systems, once per turn. Trading may be 1-for-1 on trade goods, etc., but do not have to be. You may trade for anything, including promises. Keep in mind that action cards, secret objectives, and even relics cannot be traded, but relic fragments, commodities, and trade goods definitely can. Players also begin with 5 colored generic promissory notes in their hand, and 1 faction-specific one. Now the Empyrean here have 2, it's kind of their thing. Players cannot resolve their own promissory notes, but instead use others. This is a powerful negotiation tool that you may trade with others as part of a transaction. If the promissory note does not require you to place it in your play area, it is still in your hand and can be traded with others that are not the owner. Some are abilities to give out, while others are peace or trade agreements. When you use somebody else's promissory note, you take it from your hand and give it back to them, applying the effect immediately. This can happen as an interception or be put in your play area if it's a component action. Relics are powerful abilities you gain from completing a component action on 3 relic fragments in your hand. You do this by completely getting rid of these, meaning purging them. Relics are placed face up in front of you when you receive one, and any player may see them at any time. These are very powerful passive abilities or component actions, and stay with you throughout the entire game. Now, going back to that purging thing I was talking about, this is a new mechanic that means completely discarding it, not just into a discard pile, but removing it from the game entirely, not to be used again. Players begin the game with their 3 leaders on their leader sheet, which are faction-specific: the agent, the commander, and the hero. The agent is always unlocked at the start of the game, and is usually a negotiation tool that you may use on yourself or others for a small but definitely meaningful boost. You do this by exhausting them, and they ready during the status phase. The commander is a passive, always-on ability, but it enters play locked. You can unlock it by completing the requirements on the card, which are all faction-specific requirements. This usually is a pretty heavy buff, and can be shared with somebody else using the new Alliance promissory note, as shown here. As long as your commander is unlocked, they gain your commander ability as well. The hero is a once-per-game ultimate ability. This begins the game locked, and all factions unlock it once you have 3 scored public or secret objectives. This is a very powerful game-shifting effect that can change the tide of the battle quickly. All players should know when everybody's heroes are unlocked, because they could get used on them, and completely change up their plans as soon as they're used. Other than Hyperlanes, all tiles are different kinds of systems. All of them are important, including the empty space, which doesn't do anything inherently, but can be explored. The supernova is a tile that does not allow for any movement through or into it, a complete lockout. The asteroid field is the same way, except there are interesting ways of getting around this, including a pretty easy tech to get. The gravity rift applies +1 movement to everything moving through it, so you can slingshot yourself around. However, there's a 30% chance you're going to destroy your ships as they move through. The nebula allows for movement into it, but not through it, and everything in it has a movement value of 1. However, ships inside of it have a +1 to all of their combat rolls. Wormholes act as teleporters. Any system that has a wormhole of a certain type is adjacent to all systems with wormholes of the same type. Alpha and beta wormholes are natively on the game board and are plentiful. but delta wormholes are brought in from a faction, and gamma wormholes are brought in from things like deep space exploration. When you move through a gamma wormhole, you may travel to something called the Wormhole Nexus. This not only lets you gain the legendary planet of Malice, but also flips the Nexus from the gamma wormhole only side to the alpha, beta, gamma side, making it adjacent to almost all other wormholes on the game board. This opens you up to all threats all over the galaxy, but also allows you a connection to everybody if you're peaceful. Speaking of discovery, let's talk about frontier exploration. At the beginning of the game, each system without any planets is going to gain a frontier token. Here is that there. Players may not innately explore frontier tokens, unlike exploring planets, but can unlock the ability instead from a technology called Dark Energy Tap, letting you explore the vastness of deep space. Exploring a frontier token happens immediately after the activation and movement step of the tactical action, as long as you control ships in that system. When you explore a frontier token, you discard that token and draw a frontier card from the frontier exploration deck. These are largely more powerful than the planet exploration, but rarer and require a technology prerequisite. Here we opened up a gamma wormhole nexus. They can largely change up the game and are very exciting to grab, anywhere from opening wormholes to getting you more secret objectives. Finally, technology, which is a huge part of this game. These are powerful abilities that come in 4 types: biotic, which are green, warfare, which are red, propulsion, which are blue, and cybernetic, which are yellow, indicated on the bottom right of the card. At the beginning, you'll start with a colored technology deck that matches the color of your pieces, and also begin with the faction-specific technology. All factions have 2 of these. You'll also start with the starting technology indicated by your sheet, placed in your play area, already researched. This is shown here. You'll be researching a lot of different technologies of different colors that are pretty much skill trees throughout the game. The types of technology are either normal technologies or unit upgrade technologies. Unit upgrade technologies are placed over that unit on your sheet instead of in your play area. All units of that type that you own now have the new values as printed on the unit upgrade tech card. All of your units now have the values of this, so it is definitely worth it for most factions. When a card, such as a technology strategy card, tells you to research, you may. To do this, you must satisfy the prerequisites on the bottom left of the technology card. This is the number of icons, represented there, in the number of colors. All of the icons on the bottom left must be satisfied before you can make it there. Now, all of the icons on the bottom right of technologies in your play area satisfy a prerequisite of that color, meaning you'll gain larger and larger ones throughout the game. Moving up the skill trees, you can even start to create some multicolored technologies, such as unit upgrade techs. Unit upgrade techs do not satisfy prerequisites and also are multicolored in their own prerequisites. These may be more difficult to work around, but provide a solid boost to all of your troops at once. On top of this, a planet may have a technology specialty. This is indicated by a technology icon on the top left of the planet card. These planets may be exhausted while researching tech to provide for a prerequisite satisfaction of that color. Keep in mind that they do not provide technology specialties while exhausted, and also do not count towards them passively. They must be exhausted to do this.
Wow, what a complex game. If you need to look back at anything of these complex rules, go ahead and check out the description because I will have timestamps for everything. I did try to follow a structure similar to the rulebook, so if you want to send it along to a new player, they can follow along with that as well. If you need to know more about the faction specifically, I'll have a guide in the top right-hand corner of a playlist talking about each individual one here. Now, please like and subscribe because I will be making more of these in the future, as well as other board games and card game content on the channel. Thank you very much for watching and have a great rest of your day. Pax Magnifica Bellum Gloriosum.